Good evening and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show, and welcome back to the Gin and Tonic Show on the Gin and Tonic channel on this Friday, the 1st of December. So we have a special guest that will be joining us a little bit later, around 9 or just after 9 p.m. UK time. So in about an hour, we have an American gentleman by the name of Bill Warner. I will briefly read his bio, but I will read it again for those who come in a bit late. Just so you know who I am talking about, if I can actually find the bio here, because I think it's worthwhile. Bill Warner holds a PhD in physics and mathematics. He has been a university professor, businessman, and applied research physicist. Warner had a lifelong interest in religions, including Islam and their effects on history and civilizations. After the 9/11 New York jihad attacks, he began working on making the Islamic political doctrine, which impacts non-Muslims, available to the average person. There is a bit more of a blurb, which I'll read again when Bill joins us, but that's who we'll be having on later. Thanks again to Stop Spamming for arranging this for us. So welcome, Stops. Good evening. How are you, sir?
Hi, great. Well, yep.
So what's happened on your side then? Welcome to everybody who's watching and viewing.
Not a lot. I am currently, because like 3 days ago, because when you're sitting in a hotel, you're very, horribly bored. Because I'm past the age where you only go, I used to do that, only disco, pick up girls. But now I'm getting a little bit more quiet. And then you start going into YouTube and doing things and blah, blah. And then you get bored. And I thought, yeah, there's nothing to do. Nothing exciting. And then all of a sudden I get swamped with videos and people are saying, look at this. So at the moment I'm looking at a brilliant video, which is a lot of fun, with what's the pink shirt, hijab, Mohammed hijab.
Yes.
Why atheists don't believe. And this is so hilarious. This is so bad that it's actually entertaining. Really, it's I'm going between hilarious laughter and facepalm all the time. So it's good fun. Then there's this brilliant video which came out in parts 1 and parts 2, the God of the Gaps, where suddenly it's no longer God of the Gaps, but it's the I don't know of the gaps. And this is after Phil came around and taught Abbas and somebody else, Imran or something, I can't remember what this is all about. And now, I don't know if you remember the guy who went to Abbas and showed him that 286 sentences in chapter number 2, if you have the middle sentence, it's not 143. Anyway, so they corner this guy, and there's 3 of them. There's what's his Redbeard Hamza. He's such an idiot. And then there's the other guy, this really bad guy who thinks slavery is okay and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
and then it's Abbas.
Abbas wasn't there. He wasn't on that video.
Yeah,
Imran was there. It was Imran and Darren, and then there were a couple of other Muslims. One of them was a bit camera shy, which is
no, that's not the one I'm talking about.
Oh, another video.
There's another video. This is where the 3 of them corner this non-believer. And they try and get him to say things that he simply doesn't. Now he doesn't know the tactics, but he's amazingly good in trying to get some sort of a sense into them and showing them that, listen, what you are doing is not impressing. It's not impressing anybody. So don't do it. And this is great. So I'm going to be looking at those 2 videos now.
Cool, excellent. Well, look forward to your comments when those come out. So yes, as you may or may not be aware, for those who are viewing, I was down at Speaker's Corner last Sunday. I think it was last Sunday. And had been down for a long time. So I got to catch up with Skydive Phil, who's an expert in cosmology. Now, we were chatting on the phone this week as well. He's going, yeah, I'm not an expert. I'm going, well, I know that, Phil. You're not an expert in the sense you're not an expert compared to Lawrence Krauss. You're not a professional cosmologist, but you are an expert compared to everybody else, particularly in Speaker's Corner and almost every lame person on the face of the earth. So from that point of view, you are an expert. Yes, you have studied it. Now, you don't have a PhD, but I think he's studied to a certain level. So you are an expert. I mean, it's the same as anybody else who has expertise. I've got expertise in a little bit of psychology in a certain narrow field of that. And everybody has an expertise. It doesn't mean you have to be a published author. I mean, that's nice if you are, but you still have a level of expertise, like you have it in studying the Qur'an to whatever level you study to, a lot more than I have. So you have more, and probably more than most Muslims for that matter. So, you don't have to be a PhD for this sort of thing. So, and again, there was a conversation, watch it on the Speakers Corner UK channel. There was 3 videos of it. First, there was a sort of camera shy guy, and then he brought in Imran, the gentleman you're talking about. And then Darren Hamza joined the conversation as well. And Phil was there, and he was giving, the explanations about the universe. And again, it sort of went over, unfortunately, their heads to some degree, but the comments were the most amazing thing. And I think, without further ado, we'll go straight into comments, because you will see some more here. And obviously I shared that last week as well, but you will see some more comments this week. And for some reason, I can't screen share.
We've got somebody in the comments who is now saying that all these Muslims, they're all fakes. They're just actors.
Somebody asking, Rob, did you see Phil's video with Sean Carroll last week?
Yeah.
No, I haven't. So Rafa, if you can send that over, that'll be great. Now, I cannot screen share here. So I may have to read these comments off. I'm on
are you having the same thing that I have?
But I'm on Chromium, so I don't know if that's the difference. Normally on Chrome, as in the normal Google Chrome, I can share. But because I'm doing it on the Jinn&Tonic show, I've got a different browser. I have a different browser for each YouTube channel. Otherwise, it gets a bit confusing. So I wonder if I might have to.
So I'm the expertist. Exactly.
I wonder if I have to join you. Let me just see if I can join from the other channel and see if that's a way that I can share. And I'll just mute myself on the other one. So I'll join the Speaker's Corner here quickly and just see if.
Kafir is not a concealer of the truth. It's more like a coverer of the truth. This is why it's so stupid, this entire term, when suddenly people are saying, no, it's not this, and it's nothing bad, there's nothing wrong with it, like a farmer is somebody who's doing that, as it can be called a kafir. Come on. And really, it's stupid. Don't play games like that.
Okay. Oh, I'm hearing myself. That's not so good.
Muslims are funny when they try to talk science. Absolutely. It's hilarious.
All right. I'm going to have to... How am I going to mute myself? I'm just trying to work out how I'm going to get this working.
I can see something being presented.
Yeah, that's on the UK channel, because I cannot screen share here, and I do want to do that.
Click on this, and then it should come up anyway.
Can you hear me now, Kate?
Yeah, and there you have it.
Yeah. All right. I can hear myself here because I've got 2 browsers open. Let me see how well I can do this. All right, here we go. So the first comment, this is from a guy I've had this is very difficult. And now I'm going to do this. I can't do it like this because I can hear myself play, and I can't mute. Can't mute on the other channel, I don't think.
Okay, this is from Kenneth White, and he's talking to Rob. This is with all due respect. I like it when they start with humbly and with all due respect and things like that. You know exactly whatever is to follow now is bullshit. How can one learn something from someone who affirms he doesn't know anything? The atheist stated time and time again that he doesn't know. Agreed? Yes. This is the way to do it. Because if you don't know something, you don't make shit up. You say, I do not know. That is the honest answer. And if you come and ask a question and you say, well, what is the origin of the universe? The only answer at the moment must be and can only be, I do not know. Now, if that means you don't know anything, that's utter bullshit. But this is what a lot of people, I've seen this kind of a comment a lot of times, where it's especially Muslims. They cannot handle, I don't know. They need the certainty. They need the assertion that somebody like their God knows something and is able to tell them something. But in reality, they don't know either. But they cannot admit this.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, coming through.
Okay, good. I've managed to mute myself on the other channel now. So
brilliant.
All right, let's do that.
Okay, I've just read this and explained it a little bit.
Perfect. Yeah. So I can somebody learn something. Yeah. Obviously, he didn't say he doesn't know anything. I mean, this is just, but this is the perfect example. There's an hour and a half long conversation. Yeah. And what did the Muslims pick up? I don't know. Now he said I don't know a few times on some conclusions, but he gave a lot of information around that. It's like your ears are tuned to hear what you want to hear and ignore the rest. And this is typical, by the way. This is not the only. This will happen many times, as you'll see as we go through here. This was something. Most Muslims are afraid of stops, so they don't care to come on. It sure would be bloody interesting to see more Muslims defending their belief on your show. Plus, many Muslims don't seem to know that you're even having a hangout every Friday. So some help advertising might be useful. Because the guy at the bottom said, yeah, what's a stop? Because this fellow, Raw Keeper, said, I wish stops was on here. So this guy not knowing what stops is or stop. He said, what's a stop? And why are they something to fear? Because this guy at the top said that you chase them away. So he's like, what's a stop that chases people away? So that was quite comical. So he explained it here. So I just
but hang on, he's just playing the fool, okay? Because this is the guy this is Imran. This is the guy I was criticizing on his views on slavery.
Which one is Imran?
The Foundation.
Oh, is it? Okay, but he doesn't know who you are, though. He doesn't know what a stop is because the guy said,
bullshit. Of course he knows.
Does he?
He knows very well because I challenged him.
Right. Okay. Well, I just thought because I didn't know that. So what's a stop, and why are they something to fear? So I just thought that was kind of amusing. And then this fella sort of explained what a stop or who you are, rather than what is it like an object. That's just amusing. But anyway, okay. Moving swiftly on. That's fine. Here's another one from this fella. With all due respect, how can one learn something from somebody who affirms he doesn't know anything? The atheist stated time. Oh, that's the same one. Why is it going back to that? Okay, never mind. Moving on. There we go. Truth prevails. That was pathetic from Phil. Only thing I learned from Phil is that he doesn't know anything. What did I tell you? By the way, this if you go onto these channels or my channel or the other channels, this is what you will see played over and over again, that he doesn't know anything. Now, if you can watch an hour and a half video on the Dawa channel, 40 minutes, whatever the case is, and you come away there going, he doesn't know anything, I think your brain is in a different galaxy, maybe even a different universe. But here we go. Speaker's Corner UK. You're speaking as though your friend's explanation explained away God. He didn't. His little knowledge only increased that there is a God. And after watching the video, it seems the questions asked by Imran and Hamza were clearly destroying his he doesn't know replies. By the way, there's far more people in the park with more knowledge than your friend in cosmology, because other people also read and study up-to-date cosmology. Also, I do request next time, I'd like to see a full chat between brothers Shabir Yusuf and your friend. And just to clarify, your friend didn't answer 90% of the questions posed by the two Muslim brothers. And I quote, Hamza, every question we've asked you, you don't know. And finally, please don't leave your message in the form of assuming that somebody won a conversation in this video. Your friend clearly didn't. And pray he doesn't come across brother Sabur.
Oh, shit. Yeah, this is, it's amazing. It's actually quite sad how incredibly ignorant these people are, really, and how naive. It's amazing.
You know, and this happens time and again.
Yeah. I mean, come on, everybody should know by now that Shabir Yusuf is a liar, that he's useless. Everybody should know that Sabur is useless. He doesn't know anything. He's just stringing together some words he finds in some Christian pages and in some books, and that is it. And people worship him. I don't understand this.
Yeah, I sometimes make the tongue-in-cheek joke that they're committing shirk the way they carry on.
And you're quite right. I always laugh at you because this is so good what you're doing, because it's so true.
And of course, there was a conversation with Shabir Yusuf and Phil. For those who don't know, it's on my channel and it's probably on a few Muslim channels. And Phil went over and asked him, hey, because he came to the park to debate the Kalam argument that particular day. And so I said to him, well, let's see if we can have a conversation with Shabir. I did warn him of a bit of obscurantism. But I said, let's see, maybe he will. And so Phil asked him, and in typical Shabir fashion, he basically said, "Oh, I don't know, come back. I'm just having coffee." So we wandered around for a while, and then we came back. And then he asked him if he wanted to have the conversation about Kalam. And he went, "Well, really, I want to broaden it to something much bigger than the Kalam." And off they went on a tangent. And Phil sort of halfway through, he kind of said to me, if I remember correctly, he said, "Can you find somebody who actually wants to do it?" Because it was clear that Shabir did not want to talk about the Kalam. So I wandered around. And when I found, I think it was Godwin, and I came back and I said, "Yeah, I've got Godwin. He wants to speak." Sort of Phil made a quick exit, and they were talking about evolution and stuff like that. And when he walked away, I didn't have to say anything else. He walked away and he basically said to me, "That guy was just an obscurantist. We were getting nowhere, just spinning wheels." He said, "What a waste of time." And so, no, if you're watching this, Phil will never debate Shabir Yusuf, neither will I, and anybody that has had that conversation. You just get nowhere. You're just round and round, spinning your wheels like on a hamster wheel and getting nowhere. So,
And by the way, Shabir challenged me, and I'm not a chicken. I said, absolutely. And then he backed down. And this has been happening. And people say, why don't you debate Shabir? I said, yeah, okay, set it up, do it. But he's the one who's running away.
well, I'll host it, and the two of you can have a go at it. Yeah. But, and I don't see many Muslims online to have that conversation. We get a few that come on here, and that's great. Be it Saracen or whoever they is, even if we disagree with you, at least you can come on and share your views. We're not going to jump on you, and it's talk. So your life's not in danger. You don't have anything to fear. You just come and have a conversation.
Okay, I get frustrated after a while.
No, I know you've got a shorter fuse, but you've been doing this longer than I have. So perhaps you've got a shorter. Maybe if I've been doing it 10 years time, I may well have a shorter attention span and fuse as well. So but people do like your approach. Some like mine. It's different. People have got different approaches, and it works for different people. And sometimes it cut through the bullshit. Sometimes we do need to let them speak. It's all good. So yes, there's a whole paragraph that is virtually the opposite of what in fact actually happened. So
yeah. And by the way, in the chat, it's not only sources. What he did with Rationalizer, he also did this with Essence of Thought, where they invited him and they went to great lengths. They will pay for your ticket, we'll do everything. Come on over, we'll chat, blah, blah, blah. And in the end, they ran away.
Yeah, they wanted him to do it at their offices, and he said, "I'd like to do it at a neutral venue. I'm not going to come to your offices." And they never heard another thing back about it. I mean, it's trivially easy to go and do it in a hotel room. I mean, I visit hotel rooms, and you can hire one for 100 quid. It's no problem, easy peasy. And that sort of put the end to it. But it's good to see yourself and Essence of Thought still bringing out lots of videos and critiquing and so on. So yeah. Right, moving on. Answer is a Qaidi, non-Muslim, son of a bitch lobby leader.
Qadiani.
Thank you. My pronunciation is pitiful.
There's two different words. the Qadianis are, it's actually, they have a different prophet apparently, and this is why they're not considered as real, as to be real Muslims. It's quite funny that there are people who actually believe them. They are the biggest liars on this planet, and people believe them. Like even Michael Nugent, for example, is helping the Ahmadiyas in Ireland. And it's amazing how they seem to have got to him somehow.
This Qadiani, is that also a Ahmadiyya? Are they the same thing, or?
It's the same thing, yeah.
Oh, okay. Why would he say he's an Ahmadiyya then when he's clearly said that that he's an atheist? Anyway, yeah, I just thought those one-liners, they're always gold, aren't they?
Well, this is what they call them. They call them non-Muslims. This is the whole point.
Oh, right. Okay. So here was some fellow, when I recorded the fellow, there was this Indonesian guy, if you look on my channel, that was, quite vocal and passionate about, Islam is terrible, blah, blah, blah. And he comes from Malaysia, Indonesia. So here's a comment from him, from somebody. This yellow Chinese needs a harsh lesson, for he is too ignorant. And I said, what sort of harsh lesson do you have in mind? Speaker's corny, rubbing his ignorant fat face in the dirt. That's what I had in mind, because he's just a hater and an introvert. And I replied, violence.
Nobody knows what an introvert is.
No, probably not. Violence, because you don't like what he says or how he says it. I got it. Speaker's Corner UK, Mr. Rob. Mr. Rubb, I watched you for years. You have been debating Muslims, but I never felt any hate from you towards Muslims in your criticism of Islam. Well, that's true. I don't hate Muslims. I don't even hate Islam, but I do think that it's, number one, it's not true. And number two, it's certainly got a negative impact on society. So you're right. I don't hate Muslims or Islam per se. yes, you can debate and criticize any faith, but with reason and logic, not hate. You can't debate with one who is a dishonest and hateful. Well, you can debate with somebody who's quite hateful. That's in the eye of the beholder. Now, dishonesty, that's a different story. No, I agree. You can't. But this fellow that was speaking, this Indonesian guy, no point, can somebody accuse him of being dishonest, because you'd have to know that he is willfully, being dishonest. And that would take some investigation. You're not going to know the first time out that somebody's in the corner, unless there's a history, and obviously that you need to find out about. So I agree, you can't debate dishonest people, but then you've got to prove that somebody's dishonest. Hateful people, well, that's, as I say, in the eye of the beholder, that's an emotional response, but you can still debate, quote, hateful people, because what you really want to do is debate the facts and put aside whatever tone that they have. So, yeah, that was a nice long conversation with this fellow. Here's another. Oh, this is your one. I think it's use it.
Yep.
Okay, nice long one here. I can't remember which video this is on. This Muslim is a moron. I have no other word for this. If someone today writes sentences like the ones found in the Quran, Muslims will never admit this, because the Quran says it's impossible and the Quran is always right, because the Quran says so. So why are tears in my eyes? Would it be any different 1,000 years ago? People, poets, authors, and artists have written sentences just like the ones in the Quran for 1,000 years. But Muslim apologists pretend this never happened. Al-Razi, who died 1,100 years ago, called Muhammad an idiot and wrote about the Surah Like-It challenge. Quote, "You're talking about a work which recounts ancient myths, and which at the same time is full of contradictions and does not contain any useful information or explanation. Then you say produce something like it." And so obviously I responded to you and said, I thought it was you. Yes, the Surah Like-It challenge is complete nonsense. Have you got any resource links for further reading on the quote by Al-Razi? That'll be useful to know. And then you sent me the link there, or you told me the details there. And then a Muslim commentator joined in, quoting you, and then basically said, still doesn't provide anything like it. If you have anything, then bring it forward. The BBC, CNN, Fox News, CNBC, you'll even get a Nobel Prize. You're an idiot if you don't. Oh, I didn't know they were giving out Nobel Prizes for
that's
challenges.
This, yeah.
Yeah, as we all know, I mean, it's a unfalsifiable challenge. It's completely subjective, among many other problems. And like you said, what I'd love to get stopped, so maybe you can send it to me at some point, is something ideally either in Arabic or the direct translation in English, because next time somebody says this, I'll say, hey, here's something. What do you think about this? And unless they understand Arabic and they've got all the supposed things, that'll stop them in their tracks immediately.
You have web pages on this.
Obviously.
You just need to go to suralikeit.com. They have web pages in Arabic.
Oh, okay, cool. With, I'm guessing, English translations.
Yeah, sure. But this is for the for the benefit of Arabic-speaking people who say, well, you need to have it in Arabic. And they say, well, fuck you. Here's the one in Arabic. And we've done it on the Jinn&Tonic show. I still have a collection here from those days. I think I've saved it somewhere, where Hassan made up some sentences which are uncannily like Quran sentences. I mean, we played them to the Muslims who came on the show, and we asked them which one. Here's two sentences. Which one is Quran? Which one is not? They were unable to identify the one from the Quran.
That's a very good way of doing it. Very good way, because that way they then need to identify it. Because if you say, hey, I produced this, you're already telling them what you produced. They will find a way to reject it. Because obviously there's the confirmation bias kicking in. I've got to reject it no matter what. So if I've got 42 criteria, I can find one out of the 42 that will allow me to reject it. But if you don't tell them which is yours, brilliant. Yeah, I love it. If you could dig that out, I'd love to. I mean, I don't remember you doing that. So that would have been over a year ago.
Jinn&Tonic show. Okay, I need to check if I can find those sentences.
Yeah, we'll do another show on that. I mean, as you say, it's been years ago probably. And we've got a new audience, and I'm not aware of doing it. So I haven't seen that show. So might be worth redoing that again and having a look at that. Bring a Surah Like It, because it is annoying, and we know that they're never going to accept it. So produce something like Shakespeare. Well, no, that's not good enough. That word's wrong. Whatever. It's just But they still throw this around as if this is some kind of knockdown argument, which is just incredible. Okay, Oh, this was Mansour speaking to somebody. I think it was also the Asian guy who was talking about, he asked Mansour, how many Muslims have got Nobel Peace Prizes? And I actually looked this up. There's 12 in total, and 3 of them in science since the beginning of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1901 or whatever it is. 7 for the Peace Prize, including Malala, by the way.
There's only one scientific one.
Oh, well, when I looked there was 1 under physics and 2 under biology. So I lumped biology with physics.
No. Yeah. There's one in chemistry from 1999, an Egyptian guy working in the US. The physics guy is he is the boss of Hood Boy. I forgot his name now. I can't believe it. Oh, I'm getting old. Anyway, he's a Qadiani, so he is not a Muslim.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, he was listed under there, so interesting.
Yeah, but it's not true. So there's only one. There's only one, which is Zerai from 1999. This one I remember from the top of my head.
Okay.
But I forgot the physicist from Pakistan, who was so disgusted, by the way, that they told him, no, Chakyu Fali, you are not a Muslim, that he buggered off to London and died in London.
Who told him he was not a Muslim?
Pakistanis.
Ah, right. Okay. So here's the quote from this. As Brother Mansour said, Nobel Prize is useless to prove his point, as Malala won it. But is she a good Muslim? No, she is a hypocrite. So Nobel Peace Prize does not mean good Muslim. Likewise, even if we name many big Muslim companies, it will not make a difference, as the person may not even be a good Muslim. You have so many Jews in the Nobel Prize, yet those very Jews who can't speak about the crimes Jews are doing, killing millions. Okay, so this was just gobbledygook.
Confused.
Yeah, nonsense. And again, I pointed out that Mansour made a mistake. Even to say that because Malala won the Nobel Peace Prize, therefore the Nobel Peace Prize is not a good indication of accomplishments is just nonsense.
No, you need to distinguish between the scientific and the non-scientific. This is the difference.
Yeah, correct. But even if you didn't like her, and of course, she's a Muslim and she's considered a Muslim by everybody except a few of these people who consider her, quote, a bad Muslim. What? Because she spoke out and wanted to get educated. Yeah.
Exactly. On what grounds? This was going to be my question. On what grounds can anybody go and judge another guy whether they are a good or bad Muslim?
Yes, exactly. Because she stood up to the Taliban. I mean, I think every Muslim should be doing that. If you don't, then you could be considered a not good Muslim. So there we go. Cool. I put this comment. This was the beginning with Steve and Mansour. So Steve was there and Mansour was talking to this Indonesian fellow, and Steve, heckling brilliant Steve, atheist Steve in the corner was there. So I said, Steve is there to ensure Mansour is keeping from mishearing or strawmanning the other guy's position early on, because Steve sort of basically said in this video, stick to the point or whatever it was. So because Mansour loves to jump around. Nobel Prizes are a good indication with particular fields of expertise. Mansour's error is in claiming that because Malala received a Nobel Peace Prize, that makes the entire Nobel Peace Prize institution less valuable, in an effort to sidestep acknowledging the low number of Muslims recognized for achievements in the different fields. And so I just listed them there. Obviously, and you've corrected in the sense that the 2 in chemistry weren't actually Muslims, so there's only 1. And then you compare it with 200 Jews and 54 in physics alone, with Einstein and all the other greats.
Can I give you a very easy way of remembering this? There were roughly 1,000 people who have received a Nobel. By the way, it's not Nobel; it's a Nobel Prize by the guy who invented dynamite. So his name is Nobel, not Noble. And yes, the Nobel Prize. Sorry,
Nobel. Sorry,
exactly. Yeah. And it's roughly 1,000 recipients. So there's roughly 1,000 laureates, and one is a Muslim scientific scientific prize recipient.
Yeah.
One.
Yeah. So obviously I put there, why so few Muslims? And so this fellow responds, as Brother Mansour said, Nobel Peace Prize is useless to prove his point. Okay, so sorry, I've done this comment in the sense that I put my one in first because I started this and then put his in. So it's the same comment that I read over there. It's the same thing. So obviously he felt that the Nobel Prize was useless because Malala won it. I mean, and then went on to make some other fallacious arguments there. Cool. So this was on Facebook. Because you may have seen, or if you haven't, some Muslim channel has made 5 golden moments from Speaker's Corner where the Muslims are supposedly dominating their opponents, and one of them is Sabur talking to me. And so I posted something on Facebook about this, and here was a short conversation which we started at the top there with Sheikh Monkfish, who some of us know. And he's referring to the channel person, the person who edited or put this video out there. Would you say this guy's a serious Muslim who is not dumb? And the Muslim fellow says, the ones on SC Dawa channel, along with EF Dawa, constitute the best of Speaker's Corner from what I have observed. There are other channels with some good content too, like Pathway to Mercy and OFSC channel. The problem with the Speaker's Corner environment is that it's a supposed to be a mixed bag. And you have to be able to filter out the heckling and some of the rhetoric. Once you do that, you can easily, in my opinion, discern the speakers who are sharing wisdom and knowledge. The Muslim speakers are collectively a good bunch, and I feel they definitely outclass the Christian polemicists who prepare all week and turn up with notes. Just debate Muslims and attack Islam. Well, yes, notes are quite useful because that way you can keep on track and it shows that you've done some research, whether it's true or not. I do not bother listening to the Kemet guys, as this is a pursuit for identity rather than a truth for God. And Monkfish replies, so whilst it would be silly to make judgments based on comments in the forum, judging based on the collective arguments of the regulars associated with EF Dawa, SC Dawa, and other channels of the would actually be quite fair, he's asking. And so this again was just a response to me basically saying, hey, Muslims seem to prefer entertainment over facts. And this guy was quick to point out, and I haven't got that because it was short little comments. Rob, don't be so serious. Don't take things so seriously. It was all just in fun. And I said, well, I take the pursuit of truth seriously, but maybe I should make a video, showing the golden moments where, Muslims get, shot down. Let's see then whether you say, yeah, it's all fun. Because of course it's a double standard. So yeah, go and have a look if you want to. They've made a video with these 5 quote golden moments. This one I thought was interesting. This guy sometimes makes comments that you might even be able to respond to, but here was one that I thought was worth adding to the crazy comments. In life, we may come across many things which we do because of upbringing, social norms, social pressures, etc. Just because we think what we are doing is beneficial does not harm us. It is harming us, and we find out late. Music, this part was good. Music, you probably noticed that it makes you do involuntary actions in terms of tapping. Spiritually, it grows hypocrisy in our hearts, as I understand. It leads to corruption of the heart to bad action. So music does involuntary actions in terms of tapping. that tickled me a little bit. Allah's created everything, hence knows exactly what is of benefit to us to live a peaceful and fulfilling life. You will find that there are vocal only nasheeds, poems and songs, and most definitely Qur'an recited by various popular reciters, which you'll be able to benefit from, Allah willing. In Islam, rulings are extracted by scholars taking into account the Qur'an, tradition of the Prophet, etc., not personal intellect, whims and desires.
Yeah,
and of course it's all subjective. Yeah. I mean, if the Quran, like I always say, if the Quran was this straightforward, nobody would have to interpret anything. It would be as clear, crystal clear as anything. Be as clear as mathematics. 1 + 1 = 2. If you could produce something like that, now you'd have my attention, where nobody could possibly misunderstand unless they were unable to read or comprehend, if they had a mental breakdown. But the fact that there's so many different opinions says a lot about the message, the supposed original message. But I just love that bit about the why music is not a good thing, because you have involuntary actions in terms of tapping. Excuse me.
Okay,
Right.
before you greet Dr. Bill Warner, can I just say with the music, in case somebody does not know this yet, there is some obscure sentence in the Quran which says something about idle talk, and this is being interpreted, reinterpreted, re-massaged, redone until it comes out as anything that is idle talk with music, and therefore it is not recommended.
Okay. Well, good evening, Mr. Warner.
Good evening.
My name is Rob. I'm a co-host of the Speaker's Corner, of the Jinn&Tonic show. Apologies. I'm just going to...
Okay, Rob has got a bit of a cold. He's coughing all the time, so he has to mute himself. So let me quickly say hi then. The funny thing is that I came to get interested in Islam a couple of years ago when I was in the Middle East. And I thought, after reading, the usual thing, Quran, and then realizing it's not everything, then going for the hadiths, and then finding out what sunnah actually means, and then going for the tafsirs, and then going for the different experts and the different, well, so-called scholars, I found that most of what I was hearing was actually political. So I thought, why is everybody so bent on making Islam a religion, spiritual religion only, when maybe the Sufis are doing that, but the rest is not? And then I came across your channel, and I found that you are making a lot of sense. And I've always wondered, why is it that so few people recognize this? And this is why I think it's really great of you to come here and give us an introduction on your take on what Islam is.
Well, thank you. My take on Islam is that I interpret it through its doctrine, the Qur'an, the Sirah, and the Hadith. Briefly, most people think that Islam is a religion founded on the words of the Qur'an. But if you accept that for the moment, you'll discover there's not enough in the Qur'an to practice the religion. That is, none of the 5 pillars can be explicitly practiced on what's in the Qur'an. So where do we find out what the hell to solve this problem? Well, the Quran has 91 verses in it which state that every Muslim must imitate Muhammad's words and actions. And we find his words and actions not in the Quran, but in the Sirah, his biography, and the Hadith, his traditions. So, having said that big mouthful, if you read these 3 books, you'll discover something about them, Quran, Sirah, Hadith, and that is the majority of the text is devoted to the kafir, the non-Muslim, not how to be a Muslim. So this was what my first reading of it was led me to see, and so I decided, well, let's call the part about Islam that deals with the non-Muslim, the kafir, political, because it's certainly not religious.
Okay, then I have a book here which is incredibly interesting because it sort of links what you just said, the Sunnah, the Sirah, and the Hadith with the Quran. And you, the author, have managed to come up with a chronology where what you are doing is you are taking the life of Muhammad and you are linking that to what the Quran says, and you are giving some of it, not the standard and traditional chronology where some experts say, well, this must be in Mecca, this must be in Medina. No, you take a different approach where you are saying, let us look at the biography. In other words, what happened to Muhammad along his life, and then see if we can find matching things that get somehow reflected in the Quran. And that is a very interesting approach, and I enjoyed that very much. What brought you onto that?
Well, first off, I've been studying religion and religious text since I was a teenager. So I'm very used to reading religious text. And when I've studied Buddhism, I've studied Torah at the Orthodox synagogue. So I, as a child, was introduced to the reading of the Bible, and it fascinated me. And so I've read religious texts all my life. So that's what I brought to the reading, which is a lifetime of reading religious text. And I want them to make sense. And so the thing about it is what makes sense, believe it or not, is a story. And that's the reason the Quran doesn't make any sense when people read it, is that it's been arbitrarily readjusted, sorted out primarily in the tradition of the longest chapter is first and the shortest chapter is last. Well, that works for some purposes maybe, but it doesn't give you a story. What happens is if you take Muhammad's story and then hang the Quran off of it, everything in the Quran makes sense. Let me give you an example. One of the things that people will find when they read the Quran is it's hard to read. And one of those things is that certain subjects just sort of lurch up at you all of a sudden. If you're reading along in the Quran, all of a sudden it says it was all right to burn the palm trees, and you go, wait a minute, palm trees? Whose palm trees? Why were they burned? Why was it okay to burn them, or why would it have been wrong to burn them? But in Muhammad's day, that verse made complete sense, because everyone knew that shortly before that, Muhammad had attacked the Jews, couldn't drive them out of their fortress, and they were date palm farmers, and so he cut down and burned their date palms. So the local Arab said, this is a war crime, and he said, no, it isn't, and Allah gives him the reason why it was okay to do it. So what happens is, if you know what Muhammad was doing, the Quran makes complete and total sense.
Okay, it does. Well, if you explain it like that, it absolutely does. But I hear a lot of people who say, why on earth would anybody do that? Especially Muslims don't really understand how it is that you come to that conclusion, and how you are taking the Sirah, the biography of Muhammad, how you can actually do that when there's so many sentences which are totally unrelated. But if you look at it in context, the lovely context, then you see that it is like that. What would you say the repercussions are on both sides of the table? What do you think Muslims are saying after they hear what your thesis is? And on the other hand, how do people react who are more skeptical?
Well, first off, you've divided the room into the believer and the non-believer, that is the Muslim and the Kafir. And they have totally different views about what I do, of course. Kafirs frequently tell me, I now understand the Quran. It makes all sense to me because you've restored the story. By the way, the Quran, when you put it in the right time sequence, starts off with a hymn to God and ends with political domination of the world. So there's a vast epic story contained within the Quran. Now then, Muslims as such, I think they react to someone like myself in terms of like, what business is this is yours to mess with our sacred text? To which my response is, most of the Quran, the Surah, and the Hadith is about me, and so therefore, why can't I interpret it the way I need to?
Okay.
I mean, if you're talking about me, why can't I say what I think?
So true. Absolutely, yes. That's a very good response. And what do you get from that?
Well, like I say, from the Kafirs, they say, thank you, I now understand it. It all makes sense. And from the Muslims, basically, they range from calling me an idiot to a fool to a troublemaker to just a complete fool and an idiot, I guess is the most frequent summary. Then the liberals, and the leftist in America say, no, 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 he's not an idiot. He's a hate-filled Islamic racist bigot. So those are some of the comments I get. We have an organization in America called the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is a left-wing organization worth $250 million. And they publish a hate list, and I've been on their hate list for years now. That is, I'm a hater.
You still got a YouTube channel?
What?
How come you still got a YouTube channel?
Well, you know, I have less of a YouTube channel than what might appear to the eye. I now get notes from people which say, you know, I used to get your notifications whenever you posted a new event, new YouTube video, but I don't anymore. I'm getting the same thing from Facebook. People tell me, you know, I used to post your videos every 2 weeks on Facebook. How come you're not doing that anymore? Well, I am doing it, but you see Facebook and Twitter. I used to get 1,000 new signups a month on Twitter. Now I get 300. The lords of Silicon Valley here in America have discovered my writings, and they don't care for them too much. And so instead of throwing me out the door, they just reduce my oxygen.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, typical, isn't it, of people who are sort of critical. If you're on the far left in the US, then you know, you're in the pound seats. If you're critical of Islam or other views, then yeah, the social media definitely seems to be against you.
Well, it's definitely against me. I created the term political Islam and have worked in the area using that term for 15 years, actually 16 years. And at first, if you Googled, literally use the search engine Google political Islam, I dominated the top 3 screens. That is, as you scroll down on the searches, I dominated. Now then, 2/3 of those references are gone. They may say, well, Bill, you're just paranoid, but Google has announced as a corporate policy that if you're friendly to Islam, they will elevate your ranking, and if you're critical of Islam, they will depress your ranking.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all with the policies that are going on there. Bill, tell us, because obviously Muslims are going to criticize you. And I did see in one of your videos, you talked about that you get far less sort of violent responses than other critics. Why do you think that is?
Well, if you listen carefully to what I say so far, for instance, and what I write about, I just give the words of Muhammad and Allah. And I never criticize. I just say what it is. For instance, I don't say that it's right or wrong that 51% of the Islamic doctrine in the Quran, Surah, and Hadith is about the Kafir. I just state what it is. So if you listen carefully to what I say, I never criticize. I never condemn. I never ridicule. The most I may do on a YouTube video is to raise my eyebrow. But my purpose is, I'm a retired teacher. And so I see myself as a teacher, and it's not my purpose to show you the end result of the conclusion. I want to show you the facts and the process whereby I reach my conclusion. And if you disagree with that, well, let's start all over again with a hypothesis and work our way through and find out why we differ from each other. So I don't come to condemn. I don't come to criticize. I just come to explain what is and why it works that way. Basically, I say everything that a Muslim does has its roots in the doctrine, and here's the doctrine that he uses. I've never criticized Islamic State other than to say Islamic State has a very clear understanding of the political doctrine of Islam. So I think that helps. I'd never, in a strange way, there's two people. I live in the city of Nashville, Tennessee, and there's two people in this town who advocate for the Sunnah of Muhammad and the Quran, me and the local imams. Now, we have a different view on it, I might add. But let me explain something to you. There's three views of Islam. The first view is that of the believer. Let me give you an example. There was a time in which Muhammad stood up in the mosque and said, "Who will kill Ashraf, who has offended Allah and his prophet?" "I will, Muhammad, but first I will need to deceive him." "May I do so?" "Yes, deceive him." So the man deceived the poet, that was his crime, was he had written a poem that Muhammad didn't like, and killed him, and Muhammad then praised him. Now then, I do not say that Muhammad did the wrong thing. I just say there's three views of what Muhammad did. One, he killed a man who had offended Allah and the prophet, so therefore it was a glorious day. Then we have the modern scholars who say, well, we've all done bad things. Christianity's done bad things. Judaism has bad stuff. So let's forgive and forget and not worry about it. And then there's the Kafir view, which is my view, which is that was a moral crime. I'm all for free speech. And so that violates what I see as the right political action, which is we can say what we need to say. So here we have three views: the Kafir view, the apologist view, and the Muslim view. These three views never align with each other, nor can they be made to do so. We just need to be clear where we stand, and that's where I stand. I stand from the point of view of the Kafir.
Yeah.
Not that I'm right, and not that the Muslim is wrong. I just say I have my view and you have yours.
But Bill, don't you think if you have conflicting views, there's a methodology, and only one view can be right, or potentially they could all be wrong? And do you not think that there's a methodology that we can investigate which view is likely true over, for example, another view?
Well, that's what I advocate for. Let me give you an example further of my reasoning. Let's say that I say that jihad comes in several flavors, and the jihad of violence is by far the dominant jihad. Now, Muslim believers say, oh, no, the jihad is the inner struggle, which we share with all religions. That is, how to control your temper, how to stop smoking, that kind of thing, the inner struggle. Well, that may be, but what I find is if we're going to decide on whether Islam jihad is harmful or not, I go to the hadith, which are the traditions, and 21% of the hadith by Bukhari are about jihad. So I take those hadith or traditions about jihad and sort them into two piles: the killing pile, the killing jihad, and the inner struggle jihad. And if we do that, we'll discover that 98% of the hadith are about the killing jihad and 2% are about the inner struggle jihad. So therefore we resolve the question. There's no contradiction here. It's 2% right to say that jihad is the inner struggle, but it's 98% correct to say that jihad is killing the kafir. So therefore, we try to include everyone's view and analyze it. I use statistical methods a lot to resolve such issues.
Yes, I noticed that. That's something that did impress me, because I have 4 of your books, the 3 lessons, and the one that I recommend for people like myself who, don't have a lot of experience in Islam is the abridged Quran, where you start, as you mentioned earlier, with, going in a sequential order through his life and then inserting all of the verses. And I think in the one that I have, you just haven't doubled up on all the verses. So every single one has got its single verse in the life of Muhammad. So it's easier to understand and put into context.
Well, when you read this, if you finished it, did you not find that it made sense?
Yeah, it's much easier to understand. I mean, when I've picked up the original Quran, I'm like, this just starts randomly in one place with, longest verses first. And as Stops has pointed out many times, it's got the first verse in there is not even part of it. It's just sort of more of a prayer. And then it goes to the shortest verses. And it's very difficult to follow that way. So let me ask you then, how did you go about compiling that? Because that must have taken quite some time to kind of get the verse in order and research. When did Muhammad say this? Share a little bit on that, because I've always wanted to ask you how you came to create it the way you have.
I cheated. There was a brilliant scholar in the early 20th century who did the work for me. He's a Dutchman, as I recall, and he did an extensive amount of what the proper order of the Quran was. And so I looked at it and realized that it correlated with the life of Muhammad. I said, this man is a known scholar. I'll just steal his work and give him credit for it.
Fantastic. Great. Well, that makes it a lot easier if somebody's already done all the hard work for you.
Yes.
One other question, because I know this is what will come up, for Muslims. They will claim you're not a scholar. Now, the quick count that I did on Amazon, you've got 26 books out. You've studied this for 16 years in whatever way. Can you just share what you've done in terms of learning and understanding that? Because Muslims, when we speak to them, you have to be a scholar. You have to presumably go to some, Muslim study place, so they don't seemingly accept people like yourself as scholars. So maybe you can share a little bit of, how you've come to know what you've done and the books you've read, so that I can then pass this on, or I can say, hey, people, go and listen to the video. Here's what Bill says himself. And if you don't prepare to accept him as, some sort of expert or scholar, well, that's fine. But maybe you can share from your own mouth.
Well, first off, my study of Islam started 43 years ago. And I advocate this. I hold a doctorate in physics, and I challenge you to show me something I cannot read and understand. I challenge you to show me the verse in the Quran I cannot read and understand. I challenge you to show me the hadith I cannot understand. I challenge you to show me the paragraph or chapter in Muhammad's life I cannot understand. So just show me what I cannot understand. I'd be interested to see this. Look, I'm an intelligent man. So are you. Anyone can, and by the way, since Islam claims to be a universal political doctrine and a universal religion, how can it be universal if you can't read it and understand it? Isn't that puzzling? Exactly. And besides that, half of the Arabs, most Arabs are Muslim, and they have a high illiteracy rate. Now, so if we find an illiterate Arab, say an Egyptian, who is a believer in Islam, can we say he understands Islam? And therefore, you're going to tell me that an illiterate Arab can understand something that I can't understand? I don't think so. Look, it's meant to be a universal doctrine. So therefore, when you tell me it can't be understood and it's about me, because remember, 51% of the text is about me. So when you tell me, sir, this is written all about you, but you can't understand it, I go, really? I don't think so.
Oftentimes their response, though, is that you've got to understand it in Arabic. You've got to read it and understand Arabic in order to understand it, quote, properly. Well,
the majority of the world's Muslims can't read Arabic. In Indonesia, they don't read Arabic. And besides that, the Arabic that the Quran is written in is sort of like, you're in England, right?
Yes.
Did you go to school long enough to go that you studied Chaucer?
Well, from my accent, you may actually pick up that although I live here, I was originally in South Africa. So no, I haven't studied Chaucer.
Oh, we did. I had a great intellectual, anyway, Chaucer was written some centuries ago, and you can read it and tease out the meaning of it. But it's a very difficult English to read. Mm. And in the same way, the Arabic of the Quran is not the street Arabic in what you see on television. So it's been estimated there's fewer than 20 people who could write a full paragraph in classical Arabic. So even those, when they say you need to understand Arabic, the Arabic you need to understand is classical Arabic, which is not the Arabic that's spoken on the street today.
Right. So, but from your point of view, if you've got multiple translations, you can get a clear understanding of what's being said.
Oh, goodness gracious. When I started this work, the web, by the way, the greatest imam in the world is Google. That may sound like, I call him Imam Google. It used to be that when I started doing this intense study, which was on September 12th, after 2001, because I'd studied Islam all my life in some mild way, but I decided that I had enough understanding to make it readable to the average person, which is what I set out to do. So now let's ask your question again. I forgot your question, sir.
Oh, sorry. The question is, with the various translations, like I have five.
Oh, yes, I got it now.
Can you then get a clear understanding of the Quran?
Yes. Back to my point. What used to be that knowledge about the Quran was esoteric, but now then Google will give you the answers. There's many translation services which will show you the meaning of any particular Quran verse in 10 different translations. 10 different translations. And if you can't get the drift of it in 10 different translations, you're not going to get it at all.
Yes, understood.
Do you refer to people, or do you use other scholars or people, critics? Because I've been asked to ask you, what do you think of Ibn Warraq?
Ibn Warraq is a great man, a wonderful human being. He is a remarkable person, a profound scholar. Have I said enough?
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree with you. Yes.
He also has one other quality. He's not only intelligent, he is compassionate because he cares for humanity, and he is brave enough to speak on his own. The man is an apostate and therefore qualifies under the Sharia to be killed.
Yep.
A remarkable human being. I've met him, by the way, personally. He's very shy.
Oh, really?
He's very quiet and shy.
Wow. That must be interesting. I'd love to be there.
Well, it is. To see here's a man who has sort of moved mountains. You'd expect some, big guy, I don't know, you somehow or another with a profound look to him or something, and you would never pick him out of a crowd. He's an ordinary person and very shy, almost timid, but a fabulous scholar. His book, Why I'm Not a Muslim, was one of the first books I read on Islam. It is still one of the best books written on the subject. Mm. By the way, since he's an apostate for Islam, how are you going to say, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about?
Exactly.
How could he know?
Yeah, but I mean, talking of which, look at Salman Rushdie. He's also not a huge character, right?
I've never met him personally.
No, but if you look at him,
no, he does not appear to be a big guy.
Exactly.
He doesn't look like he plays football. Oh, wait a minute, wrong analogy. You have a different football.
No, I have a different football.
Yeah.
What about Sufism? What do you think about the opposite of facts, the more spiritual side, not the political side?
Well, I'm going to give you my first discussion of Sufism. It is political in its nature. Look, when you read the Qur'an and the Hadith, the Islam has shall we say, a harsh edge to it. I think that's generous, but justifiable. And when Islam conquered many cultures, some of these cultures had a mysticism within them. Mystical Christianity, mystical Hinduism, and mystical Buddhism. So when these countries were conquered, they in turn shaped Islam in their own image, which was putting a little goodness to it, if you will. Now, here's the trouble with Sufis. They come in all varieties. Do you remember Daniel Pearl? Perhaps he's an American, but he went to the Middle East, I believe Pakistan, to try to find a Sufi master who was supposedly in charge of the 9/11 event. Well, he found him, and he wound up being later cut into his arms cut off, his legs cut off, and his head cut off, buried in separate pieces. This killing was done by a Sufi master. So let's not get the image that all Sufis are somehow or another cuddly and warm. They come in all flavors. Now, when I was 30 years old, as a young man, my first study of Islam was with a Sufi. I went to Sufi dances and learned repetitions of sacred names of God. And so my first study of Islam was Sufism. But the trouble with Sufism is there's some dark corners in it which they don't want to shine a bright light on, and those dark corners are aspects of the Sharia. Now then, the Sufis that I studied with didn't even ask that you become a Muslim, so it was that diluted. So the term Sufism is a very broad category.
Right. Okay. Because the couple that we've interacted with here are some more kind of spiritual versions that are just totally relevant.
Rob, we're getting a lot of echo from you.
Oh dear.
By the way, Bill, we've got a live chat running, okay, on YouTube, and people are asking questions there. And somebody asked me to please tell you his name is Allah, of all things, of course, and he wants me to say that Allah is a big fan of yours.
Really?
So, okay, but now, serious question: contradictions in Islam. Where do you see the biggest ones there?
This is where my field of physics that I studied was quantum physics. And I used to be an intelligent man.
Are you fishing?
So anyway, science has to deal with contradictions as well. And when I ran into the contradictions of Islam, for instance, part of the Quran, the early Quran written in Mecca has no jihad in it at all. The latter Quran written in Medina is 21% of it is jihad. So you ask yourself the question, which is the real Islam, the peaceful Meccan Quran or the jihad-oriented Medinan Quran? And people want to resolve this question with which is the right one or the real one. I instead stepped back and looked and said, you know, instead of trying to eliminate the contradiction, why don't we accept the contradiction and just say it is contradictory in nature? Now, this is true, for instance, in the study of reality. As a quantum physicist, when you ask the question, is matter energy or is it mass? And it turns out the answer is yes. Reality is both energy and mass. And you get what you look for. That is, if you measure the mass of an electron, you'll find that. But if you try to measure the energy of it, you'll find that, but never the two simultaneously. And so I said, what we have here is a form of dualism in Islam. There's almost nothing in which does not contain a contradiction. Let me give you a hadith. Muhammad said, do not kill women and children. All right, so therefore in combat, you're not supposed to kill women and children. An admirable goal, which I advocate, by the way. But then again, when they brought in a new war machine which could do mass killing, they said, well, we may kill women and children. He said, they are from them. It is all right. So on almost every issue, we find that Islam has two views. And instead of asking the question, which one is the real one, I say they're both equally real and both are available for use. It's like having a sink with hot water and cold water. Which is the real water, the hot or the cold? Silly boy, they're both real. Use the one you need.
Yeah, I call this Islamic dualism.
Yes, precisely. And I just accept it. I do not try to resolve it because there is no resolution. You have what you need. And this contradiction is built into, as I mentioned, the Qur'an. The Qur'an in Mecca is a very different Qur'an from the Qur'an in Medina. Which was the real one? Well, they're both real. Use the one you need.
You accept that Muhammad existed?
Now then we come to a difficult point in the scholarship. I do not. Here's what I accept. That Muslims accept that he existed and that the shadow of his life is found in the Sirah and the Hadith.
Okay.
I accept the hypothesis. Did you ever study geometry?
Yes. No, well, I didn't study it, no, but yeah.
Anyway, I accept the hypothesis. Now, what is the reasoning that follows from that?
Yeah.
So there we have it.
Okay, thank you for that.
By the way, I love your little name of your show, Jinn&Tonic, because of its play on words here. And I see that from your logo, you do understand that a jinn is a creature of, by the way, did you know that jinns actually exist? And ask any Muslim, he will tell you that. There's even a chapter in the Quran called the jinn.
Yes. We sometimes have Muslims when there's a glitch, when there's some sort of a, this typical digital war room or something like this. There's a jinn standing on the line, of course.
Jinns are made of fire, as I recall.
Yeah, well, smokeless fire, yeah.
Smokeless fire. So,
exactly. Do you mind if we hit you with questions like this?
No. Remember, I told you I was a professor. If they all go to sleep, they don't ask questions.
Okay, great. Because this is an interesting one. This is also from our chat. You use the word kafir a lot. Now,
yes.
We've been hit with all sorts of things and accusations and apologetics, of course, where kafir is actually the farmer who covers the field with soil and things like that. So there's nothing wrong with the word. I hope you disagree.
Well, kafir means to conceal or cover up. That is true. I use the word because that is the original Arabic word to describe me. Most people describe non-Muslims as being, if they're esoteric people of the book, but very few would do that. Infidel is a common one, non-believer. But what I find is that the kafir is treated so badly that non-believer, which is a neutral term, does not apply. The Quran defines the kafir. And by the way, I come back to this again. The original Arabic word to describe the infidel is kafir. That is the word. Now, the reason I like to use kafir is, number one, it's precise, and it also does away with, serves a political function. Muhammad dealt with pagans, Jews, and Christians. Now then, if you call them different names, you may see them as different categories, but when you see how he treated them, that is, they had to submit to Islam, they're all the same, and so therefore the word kafir unites the pagan, the atheist, the Muslim, the Jew, not the Muslim, and Christian. So therefore it is a more general word. The other reason I like to use the word kafir is that in England, do you all know the term the N-word?
Of course.
Well, in America, we've got this magical word, N-word, which you can't say over the air or anyplace else. You only have to whisper in a dark corner. Well, kafir is sort of the K word, if you will. And so by using it, I let Muslims know that I know your little secret, that I am a kafir, and that, by the way, the most the most common adjective of the kafir is kafir hajis, which is filthy kafir. Because why they call the kafir filthy? Allah says in the Quran that the kafir is filthy. So I enjoy the use of the word because it's accurate, it's dead on, and I try to popularize it. And by the way, I've achieved a little bit of success. I'm a 76-year-old man and I always had a dream of adding a word to the language. Why, I don't know, but I just have. And if I could introduce kafir into the English language, I would die a happy man.
Well, in South Africa, it exists and it's been in circulation for a number of decades.
Do you know the history behind that?
It's probably this, because the funny thing is I went to school in Tehran. Okay, so I speak a little bit of Farsi, and then I moved down to South Africa. And funny enough, you have the word Mem Sahib, for example, in different languages, and this is thousands of kilometers apart, and this is the same identical word. So I think kafir also is something like that.
Kafir is a word, I think, now this is my private musings, is a word that was picked up by the Dutch in the East Indies.
Exactly. Yeah. And then made its way down south. Yeah.
Yes. And so it says they use the K word since the Muslims use the K word as the N word, when they moved to South Africa, they replaced the N word with the K word. That's my personal theory.
I like it. Makes sense. Before we get to the two people questions that I have here, what is your take on abrogation?
Well, it's built into the system. There are no less than 3 verses in the Quran which state that there is abrogation.
Why do Muslim apologists deny this?
Well, I don't know. I guess there is a school of thought in which it's denied. I don't know. Because what you wind up with is you have contradictions within the Quran. And in Muhammad's day, the the Kafirs of Mecca said, Muhammad, last year you said this year you say that, this contradicts each other, which is the real one? And so on those 3 separate occasions, Allah, through Muhammad, releases the idea of abrogation, that the latter verse or the later verse is stronger than the earlier verse. Now notice what it does not say. Abrogation does not mean the earlier verse is wrong or untrue. It is simply not as strong. So therefore, abrogation doesn't imply, because if the earlier verse was given by Allah, and Allah is the perfect being, God above all, how could he ever be wrong? You see the problem? If abrogation doesn't say it's wrong, it just says it's a better verse. Allah can replace one thing with something that is better. So they're both right. It's just that the latter one is better than the earlier one.
Okay, so there's no compulsion. Then a better version is kill them.
Yes. See, that's the unfortunate part here. Look, the early Quran, if only the early Quran had been written and Muhammad had stayed in Mecca, I would not be here talking to you today at all. Okay, because
of course,
the Meccan Quran, I don't have any problem with it at all. I mean, it's actually the most beautiful. I have 2 comments about translations. The most beautiful part of the Meccan Quran, which are the short chapters in the end of the book, if you do it the standard way, that is, you get the book from the bookstore, is quite beautiful. And some of the 4 or 5 verse, they're like hymns of praise. But later they get sort of cut off their heads and cut off hands and feet on the opposite sides. And I'm like, ooh, that doesn't feel so nice to me. So the latter is stronger than the earlier, which is the sad part about the whole business of Islam is that the harsher ones are the real ones, or the better ones, or the stronger ones.
Okay, I have 2 people questions, and then I'm going to hit you with your favorite question. What do you think of, or have you met Tariq Ramadan?
Oh, Tariq. That boy's in a little trouble, I understand. Telling stories about him. Tariq Ramadan is the most clever debater of Islam that I've heard do so. He is very good.
Interesting.
He's quite clever at what he does, but I would like to meet him one day. I would love to personally discuss Islam with him. I don't know that he'd love to discuss it with me, but I would love to him because I see him as Islam's best advocate.
What about him?
Honest representation. Some people say some things to Arabs and other things to non-Arabs, and so he's sort of two-faced. That's the commentary that some people have had of him.
Well, of course he does.
Okay.
I mean, I expected that. I mean, the earliest I ran into that was with Arafat. Arafat would come to the United States and give one talk, and he'd go back and and in Arabic he'd give another talk. So this saying one thing to the kafir and another to a believer is standard issue and expected. I just assume that.
What about the scholarship of Karl-Heinz Orlik?
Now, who is this again?
He's a professor in Germany, Karl-Heinz Orlik.
I don't know that I'm not familiar with him right off the top of the head. What is his merit?
Let me just get the book here. He writes, for example, Hidden Origins of Islam, and this one is with Gerd Puyn. He's also a professor in German.
Oh, Puyn. I know of this man, but I'll plead ignorance.
Puyn is the guy who went to Sana'a to do the manuscripts there.
Ah, yes. Yeah, now I know who you're talking about. Let's go back to Muhammad. Did he exist or not in the manuscripts? For instance, one of the myths about the Quran is that it was only given in it was given in 7 dialects, but there's only one perfect copy. Well, it turns out that this is a favorite myth of Islam, but it's just certainly not true. There have been other Quran. As a matter of fact, that we know there are other Qurans because Islam's own hadith says so.
Yeah, with 20 and all sorts of different, with 200 chapters and all sorts of things, yeah.
And not only that, the part that got me was that Uthman, the Quran we have today is Uthman's recension, to use the proper technical word. Recension he did such heavy editing that he produced a new edition.
Yeah.
After he produced the almighty, all-knowing, present Quran we have, he then burned the source material. Now, what does that tell you when somebody burns the source material?
It was all authentic.
But
it was contradictory. We know that.
Well, Bill, let me give you the apologist view. The apologist view is that the reason that it was burned is because they didn't want to have all these bits and pieces lying around. They just wanted to have one version of the Quran that could be sent out to the entire world. So having scraps of it, almost as if it was pages lying all over the show, is just confusing. So let's just burn all of because that was all the same anyway. This is what the apologists certainly over here say. It was all the same anyway. It was now just collated into a single book. So there's no point in having sort of spurious pages and bits and pieces of copies. And so now we've got one book and we can just duplicate one book.
Well, the problem with that is, and I like the way it sounds, is that the story that's found in the hadith contradicts it. It says there were many variations and there was arguments and debate as to which one was correct. Well, after they talked to everybody and they presented their arguments, Uthman resolved all the arguments and destroyed all the ones that contradicted him. So unfortunately, the story itself says that there was variation. You see, the Muslims used to rag on the Christians because they said there's variations in your Gospels. And the same with the Jews. There were minor variations in the text. And so they wanted to produce a text which was perfect. And so they did. They cut off all the bits and pieces that were not, quote, perfect, and they got perfection. By the way, I thought this was Allah's business.
Well, there you go.
Which is, to your knowledge, which is the first complete Quran?
Well, Uthman's recension, which was done 18 years after Muhammad died, that was the first complete Quran.
We don't have it. I mean, extant.
Oh, well, I think there's been the one in Sana'a, I think, is probably the earliest, but I'm not a scholar of this is outside my area of expertise, really.
Okay.
I read about it and I read books on it, but I don't have the soundness of popping off and saying something wise.
Yeah, because I went into the Tashkent one and I was surprised to hear that it's not even complete, even though Muslims will not admit this. And number two, there's a very, very clear error in one of the chapters where you have photographs documenting this. So I don't quite understand why Muslims still make that claim. Okay, but I have the biggest, or your favorite question, which is the biggest blunder of scientific nature in Islam?
Oh, I didn't know that was my favorite. I like the one where the sun sets in the muddy, the throne of Allah in a muddy pond every night. I just think that was like interesting.
Is that your favorite one? What about all these other? I mean, there are so many scientific miracle claims. What do you think of those?
I just commented.
Okay. All right. I thought we're going to get a huge long explanation from you about this. All right. Then we'll go for the next one, the last one that I have. And if anybody wants any more answers from Dr. Bill Warner, that please go away and ask in the chat. What do you think of this concept that is called taqiyya?
Well, that's one of those concepts when I first ran across, I was like, really? I mean, remember, I come from the world of physics, in which our dream is that the guy's not lying to you when he says he did the experiment. So, I mean, when I found out that deception was part of Islam, it was just like, well, I'll come as close as I can to being negative about Islamic doctrine. I was appalled. And yet it is very clearly spelled out. I just quoted you a hadith. Who will kill Ashraf, who has offended Allah and his prophet? I will, Muhammad, but first I will need to deceive him. May I do so? Yes, deceive him. Here is the perfect human being, the divine human prototype, Muhammad, which is 91 verses in the Quran say that he's to be duplicated and admired, and everything he did was in the right way. And here he is handing out advice to deceive a kafir in order to kill him. I don't like that.
Yeah.
And yet there is more deception in it as well. Another deception which is listed is that this was in the Sirah, and it takes place, I believe, in Ethiopia. And a man was being questioned about Islam, and he wanted to let me not tell the story because I don't have all the details right. I'd rather be clumsy than wrong. But anyway, deception is used more than once. Well, there's a verse in the Quran in which Allah says that the Jews think they're deceiving me, but I, Allah, am the greatest of deceivers.
Yeah.
I thought, I've thought about God a great deal, and yet I never came up with the idea that he was a great deceiver. I was very disappointing.
Rob,
Yes.
you got anything?
There was one that I was interested in, but often Muslims say, hey, we are, we're justified in fighting because most people, if they are threatened, they will defend themselves. We're not pacifists, which I think clearly they're not. What is your response when a Muslim says, hey, you know what? We only fight in defense. We never fight, or we never go on the attack. We're never offensive.
Well, I say to them, let's study the career of Muhammad, who committed 95 acts of jihad in the last 9 years of his life. 95 acts. So let's examine some of these. For instance, what were the Jews of Khaybar doing to hack off Muhammad? He had to travel nearly 100 miles to get to them. What about Mu'tah, where he attacked the Christians in Syria? What were the Syrian Christians doing that he needed to defend himself against? So, and what really had Ashraf done, the poet, the Jewish poet who was killed because he wrote a poem? We say, well, he wrote a poem I didn't like, I could kill him. Let me tell you, the music business would change if you could do that.
Yeah, no doubts. And what about because you also did, if I remember, you did a wonderful video that showed the Muslim incursion into North Africa and into Europe. Yes. That
was a fun piece of work.
I mean, can you share a little bit about that
Well, what happened was I read this wonderful book called The Rise of the European Economy, 400 to 900 AD, and it was written of all things by a historian who said there is no story in this book, and it is not a history book in the proper sense of the word, but it is a history as dictated by archaeology. And so he was able to show that all this work that had been done around the Mediterranean was able to draw economic consequences of it. And all of a sudden I realized that when the Christian shipping went down from 100% to 10%, that this was under the influence of jihad on the Mediterranean. So I became fascinated by this. I'd suspected it was true. And it was also, I suspected that I'd been told a lie when I was told that the Dark Ages came about just because the Germans invaded the Roman Empire. That never made sense to me. So all of a sudden here we had an economic collapse. And so that was what caused, in my opinion, the Dark Ages of Europe, was this economic collapse. I mean, imagine you're in London, right?
Yes.
Imagine if 90% of all the plane flights in and out of London were canceled, and 90% of the ships that come in and out of the British ports were removed. What would happen to the economics of England? It would collapse. It would collapse. And so this is what happened in the Mediterranean. The jihad of the Muslims destroyed the Christian shipping. Khaldun, al-Khaldun, the great Muslim historian, said that Christians could not float a plank on the inland sea. They bragged about it. But one of the things I became fascinated by was this idea of using archaeology, and archaeology can be viewed not only as objects found in the dirt, but in terms of archaeology is another peculiar form of translation of ancient documents. And this man in this textbook, well, it's not a textbook, it's a 1,200-page book. And he said that, anyway, the point is that there's many books, I'll get my tongue straight here in a moment. There are many books written on the subject of the Dark Ages, but none of them really seem to imply that Islam had anything to do with it. But I became curious about the battles that he referred to as sort of manuscript archaeology. And so he listed a whole bunch of them in his appendix, which I had never seen before. I mean, most people, if they know anything about the history of Islam, know the fall of Constantinople, the invasion by Tariq in 711 in Spain, and maybe Lepanto, and that's it. Well, here was all these. And so I said, well, you know what, let's try doing a research project. And it turns out that the internet, thank goodness, was invented. And I was able to fill out this wars that Islam had fought against the Kafir. And I came up with 548 battles that Islam had fought against the Kafir over a 1,200-year period. And so then I was faced with how do we display this data, because nobody wants to read a table of 548 battles. And so I came up with this idea of a dynamic battle map in which it unfolds in time, and each battle is given a little red dot when it happens. So you can literally see the flow of Islam into first Western Europe and Spain, and then finally into Eastern Europe through Constantinople, and provides a dynamic vision, which I think is very illuminating.
Yes, I found that fascinating to watch that and to see how it progressed. But I think it's, if people watch that, and perhaps we can find the link and let people know where that is. But I think it's clear from that. I don't know how Muslims can still make the claim that Islam, particularly after Muhammad's death, was only a defensive religion.
That battle map kind of plays havoc with that, doesn't it?
Well, I never heard of the Spanish invading the Arabian Peninsula.
No, I don't think so. Anyway, I think that Muslims should embrace their history, whatever it is, and if they don't like that history, then get another history.
See, the problem that it seems to be, Bill, is that they've had a collision with the West, and especially over here in the UK, because we have a place called Speaker's Corner, which you may or may not be aware of, and other places, but this is an open air area where people come and have conversations, and they're desperate to try and make it appear Western friendly, because any of these things we are going to, shudder at. Many of these things, slavery and, marrying young people and defensive jihad and so forth. And so they are desperate to try and make it appear this is not the case. And so they will say and apparently try and do anything to make it the case that this didn't happen the way, history says, or whatever the case may be. And so I think that's where the problem comes in for them. But in the Middle East, I'm quite happy with that. But over here, no, obviously we can't have that, because we would turn our backs on that instantly.
Let me point out something to you. You and I are now talking on a popular radio outlet, media outlet. Let's use a more generic term. We're doing something, we just assume that it's happening. We don't pay any attention to it. This is the first time in human history when the facts of the doctrine of Islam and its history are well known to the common man. Until this day in time, and it's mainly because of the internet, knowledge about Islam has always been through Arabic scholars, Middle East scholars, and other such, and theologians. And now then, for the first time, what has happened is that the common man, the ordinary working guy, can buy books on the subject of Islam that he can now read and understand. Because the current generation of writers, such as myself, Spencer, and others, we write for the common man. We do not write for the esoteric professor at Don at Oxford or something. So what we're doing here is a new phase of history where, for the first time, the average citizen can read and understand the doctrine of Islam and its history. This is a miraculous thing which most people don't even recognize has happened. Because previous to 9/11, the books were written with scholars, but they were not written for the ordinary person.
Yeah, that's true. And I think for me, I'm much more interested in people who are not Muslims, because they will potentially be less biased and more critical, or at least analyze it, I would suggest, more openly than Islamic scholars, because my, again, admittedly limited knowledge seems to show that Islamic scholars are only looking to confirm what they already believe. They're not looking to critique it in the same way that you and others are doing. And so I'm much more interested in your critique, because I think that's, in a sense, more honest, because you're standing outside of the ideology and looking in and asking questions. When you're inside, they don't tend to do that in any sort of way that I can see that's similar to yours, or anybody else for that matter.
And one of the worst of these apologists are those in the universities.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about in England, but in America, the universities have become no longer they teach debate, they teach ideology.
Yep, same.
Oh, we've got the videos here. I mean, Stops will be critiquing some of them. They go around to the universities telling them what, and they don't have, the debates are very few here. So we know people personally that are Muslims that we don't hold in high regard, to put it mildly. And they go around and if you had to have a conversation with them, they would look, with the greatest of respect to them, whatever that is, they would look like they are children having a conversation with you. And yet they're going around to, universities, saying certain things. And when I've spoken to them and Stops and other people, I mean, their level of knowledge is extremely low. And this is what's happening at the moment. So it's almost like an ideological thing that they're doing. And they're all Sunnis. So they have a fairly, what we would consider somewhat extreme view of Islam, although they're desperately trying to make it sound palatable for the West.
By the way, could we discuss extremism for a moment and moderate? I never use those terms. I only use those terms which are found in the Quran, the Surah, and the Hadith. And extremist and moderate are not found in the Quran, the Surah, and the Hadith. Those are made-up words by Westerners. And what I use are the words that come from the doctrine itself. He's a Muslim who practices the Quran of Mecca. He's a Muslim who practices the Quran of Medina. So he could be called a Medinan Muslim, but he's not an extremist. And what most people call a moderate Muslim is simply one who doesn't apply all the doctrine. The other thing is never discuss Muslims, only discuss the doctrine. When you start discussing Muslims, you've got 1.5 billion people to talk about, and who can bother with that? But when you talk doctrine, you've only got Muhammad and Allah.
Yes, that's a good point. Obviously, focusing on the ideology rather than the people, although some people obviously interpret it or take it more seriously than others. But I think you're right in that sense of, because whenever something's pointed out, so people will walk around and say, well, is ISIS, we had this show a couple of weeks ago, is ISIS, is there any foundation in Islam for ISIS?
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. But now they don't like that. And they go, no, those are not real Muslims. Hey, a real Muslim is, quote, me, and they'll give their reasons why.
A real Muslim is the man who follows the Sunnah of Muhammad and the words of Allah. That's what a real Muslim is, and has nothing to do with anyone else.
Exactly. Yeah. And speaking of which, where do you put all the parallels with Judaism?
I don't. You're looking for the lecture on comparative religion. It's down the hall, sir.
Okay, so you don't see it as Judaism 2.0.
But having said that, it is real clear that if you were a Muslim, I would tell you I'm a kafir. I believe that Muhammad was deluded and the Quran is a derivative work.
Okay.
When I say it's a derivative work, what I mean is the great majority of it is found in the Old Testament and the New Testament.
So it'd be fair to say that you don't believe that Muhammad was spoken to by an angel in a cave.
I do not.
No.
Evidence is lacking.
Let's go back to reality a bit. You must have heard of the Golden Age and the scientific method, Al-Haytham, Khwarizmi, and all that. What is your take on that?
My take on that is that the Islamic Golden Age looks golden only because they had crushed Western thought. The jihad, once the jihad had destroyed the Persian Empire and the Greek, after the Roman, the Byzantine Empire, once they'd done the great destruction, for instance, Damascus used to be the center of thought for the Western world, for the Christian world. Once that's been crushed and destroyed, why wouldn't it be weak in comparison? So what the Golden Age is compared against is the Dark Ages of Europe, and that comparison looks good. However, the comparison is not as good as it appears on the surface. Most people say if he had an Arab name, then he was a Muslim, but this is simply not true. For centuries, Arab names were held by those who held them before Islam invaded. Remember, there was an Arab world before Muhammad. And so therefore, Christianity was in Iraq and other such places. So the Golden Age includes Arab names, which are Jews and Christians who had an Arab name. And the other is it includes some of the great Muslim scholars were basically apostates, and their work was never used by Muslims after they died. So I'm not trying to, Islam did excellent work on astronomy. They did excellent work on geography. But by and large, how are you going to do excellent work if your two fundamental premises are there are no natural laws and all authority comes from not from experiments. There is no cause and effect, but all knowledge has to come from Quran, Sirah, Hadith. Try running a physics workshop off of that. No natural laws and no cause and effect. Dude, you just destroyed the modern world. And so therefore, the golden age ended with Ghazali's declaration that philosophers were silly and all it counted was revelation. So I don't think that much of the golden age. What it did, it mined the reserves of intelligence that were there after the Muslims invaded. But after a few centuries, that all went away. We need to explain the fact that if Islam was such a great intellectual powerhouse, how come there's almost no modern scholars who've been given Nobel Prizes who are Muslim? That needs to be explained as well. The other thing about Islam that doesn't give for great science is that the Sharia says that Muslims are not to ask difficult questions. Well, as a scientist, let me tell you, the only question worth asking is a difficult question.
But Bill, the Quran predicts the Big Bang.
Well, all right.
What about the scientific method? Do you have anything on the history? Because we get that a lot, that Al-Haytham, he was the origin of the scientific method.
What?
Yeah.
Say that again.
Al-Haytham, a guy, a polymath also during the Golden Age, I think 11 something. He is the origin of the scientific method because he propagated that you only use experiments and data before you come to a conclusion.
I absolutely agree with him. But that, how come it has not worked out well today?
I thought you know about this, because he didn't. He just said, listen, what we need to do is we need to trust what we experiment with. And that is all he did. And this is not the scientific method. But a lot of Muslims are making it to look that way.
Okay, and I felt like, gosh, I've never heard of this guy.
He's a guy, he did a lot in optics. He was the guy, he was assigned the honor of having invented the camera obscura, even though 1,000 years earlier the Chinese already had it, the Greeks had experimented it, the whole world had known about it, but he's the guy who invented it.
Okay, score one for Islam.
Oh goodness, yeah. What is the next thing that you're going to be up to? Because we've taken up an hour of your time. How much more time do you have?
How about 23 more minutes?
Okay, great. 23 more minutes sounds like a good
there's
number.
The physicist there's the physicist. 23 minutes
and a half.
Beautiful.
Okay.
I love the business of asking questions, by the way. Then I don't have to think about anything. I just answer the question.
Yeah, because look, I love picking your brain, okay? Because you have so much stuck in there where, you know, when you are sitting in front of the camera, you are very strict, very, you know, with the raised index finger. And this is why I asked, can I liven up the video that you did with the, what I like about Islam, you know, things that I appreciate about Islam. And the funny thing is, most people don't even understand it. Most people actually think that this is an homage to Islam. They don't really see the hidden messages in there. This is why this is so funny. This is why this is so great. This is why I love this video. I love your idea. That's why it's very nice to be able to pick your brain on all these things, because you know a lot about all these things. So you went and you went from the idea to a thesis, to then looking for evidence, and then you founded the Institute as such of Political Islam, and you are actually being booked by people to give your opinion on this. How much of that is actually happening? How much impact do you have, or how much visibility do you think you're getting?
Well, I have an impact on the web, primarily in America, but I actually have an impact of all places in Central Europe. There's a Center for the Study of Political Islam International, and then Brno, Czech is the founding city. And I have about 100 people who work with me in Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, Czech Republic, and did I mention? Anyway, there's one more there who doesn't immediately come to mind. Oh, Austria and Germany. And I have some influence, for instance, within the freedom parties. I gave, when I come to Europe every year, and I give, last time I was there, I gave talks to the AfD, Alternative for Deutschland.
That's terrible.
And so what I did was I gave them a lecture on the use of objective language.
Okay.
And what I said is if one of the things that a scientist has to do is precisely define his terms. What I find is that the discussion of Islam is all with mushy terms like radical, extreme. Well, what do those mean exactly? And so what I did was I showed them that if they were going to do anything, they needed to use the proper language, because the language has been highly compromised. There's it all depends on what the word is means, is a famous quote from Bill Clinton when he was under duress for having sex with interns. And so what we need to do is we do need to precisely define our words. And so I gave a talk with that on the AFD. I've also met with the Austrian Freedom Party. And so my influence is not so much in America as it is in Central Europe. Oh, Hungary was the nation I was trying to come up with.
Okay. Wow.
When I go to Central
Europe, okay, those people are now extreme right-wing parties. They're the populist parties, like with Geert Wilders and Marine Le Pen and this kind of thing. So AFD is going back to the good old values of the family, where we are going to have more children and generate more German children and not let all those refugees into the country. So this is quite ominous.
I tell you what I find ominous is the reports I get in Germany of what's happening. I met Michael Stutzenberger, who's threatened with a 6 month.
Now going to jail for 6 months. Can you believe it?
And for showing a historic photo.
This is the worst of all. I've mentioned this so people know what we're talking about, because I've highlighted this last week already. So this is a scandal. It's
an absolute scandal, and it's a collapse of our civilization. I've met Michael Stutzenberger. He's a fine man, an intelligent man who cares for not just for Germans, but for all humanity. Exactly. He's a courageous man.
Can you remind us what happened here?
This is where I said this. He's a journalist, and what he did is he wrote an article as a reply to a newspaper article in the German newspaper, and he highlighted a historic photo from 80 years ago where a mufti from, I think it was the Grand Mufti from Jerusalem, where he went and he was greeted by a Nazi high-ranking officer. And the thing what happened, the picture shows a Nazi obviously with a swastika on his armband. And the funny thing is, the judge told him that he was propagating Nazism by doing that.
I mean, I'm laughing because it's so absurd.
Absolutely unbelievable.
I wonder what that same judge would think if he read the history books in my office. And when I read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, does he think I'm advocating? My word.
No, it gets worse. This is the first part, because the second part is he was put on probation. Do you know what the terms are? He's not allowed to criticize Islam for 3 years.
What's wrong with criticizing Judaism? What's wrong with criticizing Christianity? What's wrong with criticizing Buddhism? What's wrong with criticizing anything?
How can a judge in Germany tell a journalist they're not allowed to do their work, they're not allowed to do what they're supposed to be doing? How can a judge tell a person how to do their job? That's incredible. And most of all, singling out Islam. He's allowed to criticize anyone else, but not Islam.
Well, this is what Sharia law looks like. And what's happening is that Merkel, who was a great disappointment to me, I'll leave Merkel at that. I don't understand the woman. There's something, I simply do not understand her.
Perhaps, Bill, you could speak on what your thoughts are on the Sharia and the Islamic encroachment on Western civilization.
Well, it's here. Let me put it this way. Do y'all use the term Muslim Brotherhood in England?
Yes. Yeah, we're aware of that.
The Muslim Brotherhood is far more dangerous to our civilization than ISIS or Islamic State or Boko Haram or the Taliban or anyone else, Al-Qaeda. There's various forms of jihad. There's jihad of the sword, which is what they practice. Then there's jihad of speech, pen, and money. Those are far more dangerous. And what we see is that Islam is bringing out through its work at universities and other such places, it's bringing into bear political Islam, which means you cannot criticize Islam. So this is all part and parcel of the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood. And it is the most dangerous part of civilizational war. By the way, let me praise Muhammad. Muhammad was the greatest military thinker who ever lived. No one dies today because of Alexander the Great. No one dies today because of Napoleon, Caesar. But someone died today because of Muhammad. Muhammad created a form of war which not only includes kinetic war, the war of bullets and bombs, but also civilizational war, where the hijab and food and how you go to the bathroom can be used as elements of war. He was the greatest military thinker who ever existed, because he went from kinetic war to civilizational war. And what we see is that Europe never is, the bullets, the truck explosions, which will happen somewhat over Christmas in honor of the death of the birth of Jesus, those are not the real problem. The real problem is that Merkel won't let Sturzenberger criticize Islam. That's a greater loss than the 40 bodies that will be stacked up because of a truck plowing through a Christmas village.
And what would you say is or what could you offer as some sort of solution?
I offer the solutions that our civilization is based upon. I offer you the solution of unitary ethic in which people are treated the same no matter what they are. That is, Muslims and Kafirs in the same courtroom would receive the same justice. That is, we have a unitary ethical system, and that we have used critical thought as to advance ideas. It is critical thought that made us great. And now then we're throwing away critical thought and we're letting Islam impose its dualistic ethics, which is how you're treated depends on who you are. A Muslim is treated better than a non-Muslim. And I understand, by the way, that in the police force of England, that this is commonly true. The Kafir gets his chops busted, whereas the Muslim gets a, sorry, dude, we're out of your way now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Over here now, they are policing the social media and, quote, hate speech far more than the grooming gangs, for example. Apparently, the grooming gangs that I saw an article again are running still in Rotherham, in the place that made world headlines a little while back. But the police are far more exercised in their chasing of potential hate tweets and so forth. And this is where
By the way,
you know.
Could you explain to me what is hate speech?
We don't know. We are very puzzled by this as well.
And what if I say I hate speech? Is that okay?
Yeah, exactly. It's stupid.
And because hate is an emotion.
This whole concept of hate is stupid. I don't hate people. I don't hate anything, you know? I mean, I hate the people because I was in a hotel in Kabul when Taliban attacked it. So those people I hate because they tried to kill me. So, and I think I'm allowed to hate them. But other than that, I don't hate anyone.
Well, that's one reason I advocate discussing the doctrine of Islam instead of the Islamic people.
Exactly.
I stay away from discussing people. Instead, I discuss, here's a concept, I discuss ideas.
Yeah, and this is what Sam Harris said. We discuss bad ideas, and Islam is the motherlode of bad ideas.
Sam Harris is a great man.
What about all these groups? Have you heard of 1001 Inventions?
No.
This is a group, also a Muslim Brotherhood outlet, which is geared towards scientific experiments, geared towards kids, because what they're trying to instill on kids is that Islam is the foundation for all science. So this is, yeah, and they were very successful. They came to the States. They were in which was it? The National Geographic in Philadelphia. I can't remember where it was. They've been very successful going everywhere. They've even been to Holland now. They came short in Germany because what they do is they go and get money from the governments to put up an exhibition showing kids, especially because it's a touch thing where they can see things, and they propagate Firnas flying his flying machine in Cordoba 1,000 years before the Wright brothers and things like that. So they're trying to make it look as though all the famous things, all the useful things in science all came from Muslims. So anyway, so this is one of the outlets. What about other outlets, like political outlets, like Hizb ut-Tahrir? This is a question from the chat again. What do you think of Hizb ut-Tahrir?
They do a fabulous job. They're a great threat to our civilization. See, I've praised them. But basically what they do is they teach the real Islam. Where they teach it unapologetically. They prepare all of the groundwork such that to become a jihadi is the next natural step. Very clever, very shrewd, very tough, very reasonable in their own form of reason.
But aren't they also good because they do expose Islam? And of course, to use your term, the Meccan Muslims do not like the, quote, Medinan Muslims exposing it in such a way. And so seems to be, certainly here in the UK, they don't like each other.
Well, Too bad.
Do you try getting answers from Muslims? Like, have you ever tried asking a Muslim, do you really believe that ants can talk, or that a piece of steak can revive a corpse? Have you ever tried taking literal pieces out of the Quran?
No, I have not. Usually what I do is I speak to the people who offer to step in front of me and sit down and listen. I mean, let me give you an example. I did not seek you out. I responded to an email from you. I don't promote myself at all. I simply wait for in my inbox and the telephone to ring. And so my message is somewhat passive. And yet, in spite of that, I have 40,000 followers on YouTube, 40,000 followers on. If I knew how to promote myself, I'd do well. So I don't ask for the audience. The audience asks for me.
Have you ever had a debate with a Muslim apologist?
Oh, yes. More than once. More than once. I've written the only book I've ever known on the subject. I wrote a book called Factual Persuasion, which is how to debate with Muslims. It turns out that it's an interesting thing to do, debate with Muslims, because it turns out that there's only a very limited number of arguments for them and against them. And so therefore, it's an easy doctrine to master. Once you've seen all the arguments, anybody can debate with them.
Yeah, this is true.
Is that a book that's on Amazon, Bill?
Yes, it is.
And just for everybody here, for people who are interested in looking at the books that you offer and to find out more than what obviously we've had the short time with you, where can they go for the best information to find out more?
Well, I have a website called politicalislam.com. You can buy my books there. You can buy them off of Amazon. You can buy them off of eBay. But I write my books to be easy to understand. They're I write two sizes of books, which is an odd way to put it. I write bigger books and I write smaller books. And the smaller books are, here's what happened. My small books came from, I live in the state of Tennessee, and I was down at the legislature lobbying about a bill countering Sharia. And so I realized that I was dealing with legislators who didn't know Sharia from sunshine. And so I took and decided that I would write them a book on Sharia that they could read and understand. Now, most people believe that Islam is almost impossible to understand, and so therefore, if you give them a book that's 400 pages long, they're never going to read it. I mean, they just won't even try. So I came home from a lobbying session in which a state senator said, I don't have time to read all the laws I'm supposed to vote on. So I said to myself, this man will not read a big book. So I came home, called my printer, and I said, how many pages are in 1/8 of 1 inch? And he told me. And so I wrote a 60-page book because that made it 1/8 of 1 inch thick. Do y'all still speak 1/8 of an inch in England?
Not really, but I understand the term now.
Okay. Anyway, it's very thin. I sold them by the tens of thousands. And so I just went to myself, wait a minute. These people want small books. So I then went through and made my Life of Muhammad 80 pages. So I sell the Life of Muhammad in a thick version and a thin version. The little versions outsell the big ones 10 to 1.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting.
Here's one request, Bilba, and I almost forgot to ask you. Is there any chance that you will in the future, or could you consider converting your books into audiobooks? For me, that is what and I think hopefully I speak for some other people, where you can have it in your iPhone, you're out jogging or walking or doing something, and I can just listen to somebody reading your books off. Is there any future thoughts on that?
The answer is yes. That's underway right now. We just finished the 2-hour Qur'an, and I, by the way, am the reader, and we are working on the Hadith and the Sirah, the Sharia. So no, this is all underway.
And where will this be available, and when?
On my website and on Amazon.
Available now or next year at some point?
They're available now on the website, Political Islam, but they're not yet on Amazon.
Perfect. Okay, that makes it so much easier, because I have bought 4 of your books and I haven't got through all of them, because to sit and read for me is not so easy. I love audiobooks. I just listen to them over and over so that I pick up more each time. So I'm grateful that you have started, and obviously you'll continue doing that. So I'll have a look at that.
You have my email address?
No, I don't have your personal one. So if I could grab that, that'll be great.
It's real simple. bw@politicalislam.com. Drop me a note and I'll give you a copy of 2 of the books already, just for free.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. I'll do that, and definitely I'll recommend that to other people as well. We've sort of come to that time where, it stops. Have you got anything else? Because
I would just like to mention something. Bill, if ever you are bored on a Friday afternoon, please don't hesitate. If you want to do something, just come in here. If you want to bounce ideas off us or something like this, please, you're always welcome to come back here at any time. Just hit us up, and you can always come and watch this and put a comment in the show or a question or anything like that. You're always welcome to come and join in with your knowledge. So it's greatly appreciated. So I know that you don't like propagating yourself, but I can't go and beg you every single week and say, come back, please come back. So yeah.
I tell you what, I'll take you up on your offer. And I'll tell you why. You're easy to deal with. I get interviewed by a lot of people, and there's some people are better than others, sir. Let me assure you.
Oh, geez, shucks, thanks.
No, you're easy to chat with.
Well, Bill, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on again. We'll definitely have you on again in the future. We won't keep it too long, and if you're available, then obviously we'll do that again. And what I think would be useful in future is maybe have a topic that we can ahead of time that you can have in your some thoughts on, and then we can talk on a specific topic, because obviously I just wanted to get an opportunity, and thanks to Stops and you for coming on to get your message out there. So politicalislam.com for anybody that's interested in the books and the audio, and I'll be looking at that myself. So it's a huge pleasure, and thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. Hopefully we will speak again with you.
Very good. I would like to do that. And by the way, if on the other hand, for instance, something happens and you want to ask me questions about what's in the news, if something like that, let's keep the door so it'll swing both ways. You're free to ask me anytime.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
I've enjoyed myself. Y'all have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that was brilliant. That was really brilliant. I love the staccato. I love the quick, easy, straight answers. No pussyfooting around. Brilliant.
No, and there's just so much knowledge there as well.
Bill Warner, peace be upon you.
Indeed. No, and that's what appeals to me. And also, I think the other thing is he's far less judgmental than many of us. And he makes you and I look like he's more of a teacher.
I realized that too. I thought, no. It's so true.
And I just had a quick look. 26 books he's done now. So people can claim he's not a scholar or whatever, and I'm sure he may not say the word that, I'm a scholar in that way. And this is again, if you listen to him, he perfectly demonstrates the Dunning-Kruger effect. Somebody certainly with physics, and now he's been investigating this for 43 years and written 26 books, etc. Those sort of people go, do you know what? I'm still learning. I'm whatever. None of them will come and tell you how much they know per se in that way. And so, it's the rest of it. Well, I'll speak maybe for myself and other ignorant people. We tend to say more things, because we're ignorant, whereas the people that have more expertise and more knowledge tend to be, as you heard some of his responses there, are more tentative.
Thanks. He also doesn't know. You see, this is the point. The good people, the real people with knowledge, don't know. So where do we go? But Ali Dawa, he knows.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's.
Oh goodness, this is so funny. Okay, this is brilliant. I love this, and it's true. I could also do this like all night and just pick the brain. Thank you very much, guys, for the questions. That was very, very constructive, I think. This is good.
No, I think it was excellent. I'll keep the rest of the crazy comments for next week because there was still plenty left there to do.
Yes.
So, again, I think that brings the show to a close. I think we've done a great show.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stops, for getting hold of him. We'll have a thought about what we do next week, and we'll look for other people. I'm going to see if I can reach out to other people like that. He mentioned Robert Spencer. I have read a couple of Spencer's book. Again, people like Spencer are maligned as, Nazi, racist, right-wing.
I tried contacting him once, but he did not come back.
I'll try that because I did speak to him once.
I tried Ayan. I tried a lot of people, but it didn't work.
No, maybe you just didn't catch them at the right time or whatever. I'm sure.
Yeah, it's possible. But what is interesting, there's a very interesting comment that he made. I do not go out and sell myself. You need to come to me. And I think this is true for a lot of people. because I've brought in people where people said, how the fuck did you get him on the Gin and Tonic show? Well, I was just polite. I asked and I said, this is what we do. Would you like to contribute? And there's a lot of respect and there's a lot of feedback from people who will say, okay, yes, I'm willing to do that, because they come on the show and they realize, or they look at a couple of samples and they realize that we're not militant or assholes or something, but that we try and be objective as possible. And then they will come and talk to us. So if anybody has ideas, it's very easy. People are approachable and accessible, and you can talk to them. So yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, having sort of Bill and the masked Arab and in the past Aussie and, a few people that some people know that we can pass on.
Exactly. Yeah, Christian Prince. Pity that he didn't come on.
I mean, I'll try that option again. I'm just, I'm not sure that he's prepared to come on here.
But come on. Some people do have a chip on the shoulder, right?
Well,
it's the guy, it's the Zakir Naik. I'm not going to debate you unless you have 10,000 minimum subscribers or something,
Yes. Yeah. Pat
Condell. Yeah, that would actually be quite good.
I might try and reach out to him. I don't know whether he's up for having that sort of conversation. I think it sounds like he might make you look tame. I do watch his videos. I don't know if they're scripted or not, but he's obviously quite good. He seems to be able to do it in a single take as well, straight to camera, which is not an easy thing to do. That's for sure. So, but yeah, anybody else that's like that, we get on. I quite like Adam Dean on the show. Adam Dean is, to me anyway, and Stops, you know a lot more about it. He's kind of, there's two sides to a coin there.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what I'm cautious about with that, because we'll probably end up having not necessarily it'll probably be more adversarial than it is, what we've had here with Bill. I'd rather have Majid Nawaz on than Adam Dean personally. But we'll see what we can do over time. And if anybody knows somebody, because oftentimes we are, Stops and I may not know many of these people. If anybody knows somebody that prepared to get them on, we can send them some sample shows from guests we've had on that they can listen to if they want to see that, we're not taking the piss or whatever the case is, and we're not challenging their beliefs necessarily. We want to hear their point of view. Then yeah, let us know.
Okay.
So that Stops.
See you next week.
Today, or shall we let that go? I'm not that fussed about hadith of the day, but if you've got one, great. If not, all good.
Oh, I can quickly dig one up. Yeah, that's very easy.
Cool. So while Stops is doing that, again, we'll be back next week on the Gin and Tonic show on the Gin and Tonic channel. And so if you've got any ideas, get Donald Trump on. I don't think we'd have a particularly coherent conversation, even if we could get him on. Not that we would ever get him on, but yeah.
Yes,
I've asked the Muslims; they don't want to come on. For them, it's the intellectual battleground of Speaker's Corner, because there they can say whatever they like, and they can seemingly get away with it on camera. But coming online, as you saw when I went around with the camera asking who would debate Christian Prince, there's all kinds of excuses. So. I don't know that we get too many on here. So people like Saracen and a few other guests we've had, there is credit where credit is due. They come on, they have the conversation, and I personally, and I think I speak for you as well, Stops, we're not here to make people look foolish, but what we are here to do is challenge beliefs. That's the important thing. I don't want somebody to walk away feeling like they've been made to look small. That's not my purpose, and I'm sure that's not yours either. So it's really a case of challenging the beliefs, and might be a bit more blunt than perhaps they used to, but this is an adult show for adult people. So there we go. Over to you, sir.
Sahih Muslim, book 42, number 7058. The world is a prison house for a believer and a paradise for a non-believer.
And on that wonderful note, I think we'll bring the show.
But hang on, did you get the world is a prison for a believer and a paradise for non-believer? The world. It's only in heaven that this then gets reversed.
Correct. Yeah. No, I got that. Which, amazing. Of course, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is a prison. This is what life is like. But of course, this is what religion has to propagate. Because if religion propagates that you could have a wonderful life, well then, there would be no need to follow rules, and people wouldn't worry about heaven.
Brilliant.
So it's got to be awful down here so that you can have it afterwards.
Bye.
Thanks so much. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Stops. Thanks to the viewers and everybody in the chat. We'll see you same time next Friday. Good night.